Go ahead.
Oh, okay. So he didn't know how to answer. So Prabhupada said, turn to such and such verse, 18th chapter, such and such. Sarva Dharma Paradharjamam. Read the English. Just surrender unto me, right? Just forget all this Dharma and do what I say. And Janardhan said, he said, as soon as I read that, all of a sudden I realized, what? I had never understood what Bhagavad Gita, what is the purpose? What is the aim? So that's how Janardhan became a devotee, and when he went back to Montreal, he rented this bowling alley. And so in end of March, April, we were engaged by Kirtanananda to rip up the lanes, where the gutters, where the ball rolls, to make it one smooth floor. And yeah, that was our function. And I was learning to cook, and we go to the Warsaw market and buy all the seconds, which are a little damaged, are cheaper, and bring back for cooking. So I was under the impression in the beginning that Krishna consciousness was going to the Warsaw market, buy boga, come back, make prasadam, offer, then eat, then take a nap, and then whatever's left, you take. That was that was Krishna consciousness, right? So in this way, anyway, so Kirtanananda left, and I was thinking all the time. Not all the time, but shortly after I arrived there, I kept thinking, I gotta have my own center and do things the way I think. But I knew from my Navy days, I was the low man on the totem pole. So whatever, the leading person said, you do it, and no argument. So that was my attitude. And of course, me and Pradyumna became good friends. And he was immediately interested in Sanskrit. So sometimes he went to the university. One day he came back with a little book. He said, HANSADUTTA, look at this book. I know we're not supposed to read other things, but this is just like what the Swami tells us. It's exactly the same thing. And that was that little book, Lord Chaitanya, his Persit, by Bhaktivinoda, who had sent it in the 18 something or other. I said, why not take it to the Swami and ask him? We can ask him. And of course, Prabhupada was, elated in this way. And then later, during that time, I was in Montreal. Jayapataka came there. Achyutananda came there. It was the jumping off place for draft dodgers. Achyutananda. And Achyutananda, he took us to the Indian store. And one of the items that we became absolutely addicted to were poppers. The other thing that happened in that period was, because I was married and Himavati needed some space, I came to know Levine, what was the name? Ishan.
Yeah.
Anyway, he later became Ishan, and his wife was Vibhavati, but they weren't initiated. They were running a kind of house with a lot of young people, musicians. They were musicians. And he was coming to the temple, very irregular, but he gave me a room in that house, which I didn't have to pay for. And it was very convenient because they had a room where they had a piano and people could sit around and read. And off to the side they had a kitchen. And as soon as I saw that, I said, here, every day, if I sit here and play the drum and sing, and then also cook something, maybe I can make some devotees. And which is what I did. So from that place, Bardraj became a devotee, Chandanacharya, Sripadi, many boys became devotees. And I told Ishan we should make a program where we advertise that your rooms, and then we try to make them devotees. But if it doesn't work within a month, then we evict them. We have we just use it as a place where we can recruit people, right? So that's kind of what that was.
And the temple was going on simultaneously?
Yeah.
Okay.
It was just around the corner, not far away, Henry Street, I think it was. And Prabhupada, when he came there, we got him an apartment, but not in that house, in some other place. But anyway, it was nearby the temple, and it was very effective. So Bhardraj became he became the leading artist. When we went to Boston at one point, and I could see that he was a very, very talented artist, and I wanted to introduce him to Prabhupada. So I took him to Prabhupada. I said, "Swami, this boy, he's really a very great, talented artist." And Prabhupada said, "Oh, yes." They immediately gave him a picture of Lord Chaitanya, and he said, "Here, you do this and bring it back to me." So after Bhardraj was finished, which took him a day, I think, when Prabhupada saw it, his eyes lit up like silver dollars. Just, oh. Anyway, so he went on to become a very, very, how do you say, instrumental in illustrating Prabhupada's books. I don't know, you can ask me something if you want.
Yeah, you were mentioning that you wanted to start the chanting, but Kirtanansa said this is not how the way it's done. So how it began? That's one question.
Yeah.
And another question is, when did you meet Prabhupada for the first time?
I met him in Montreal for the first time.
Montreal.
I actually, after I read that little book, Easy Journey, I didn't even know that there was a person, an actual person, who was available. I just thought it was, whatever it said, it was so revolutionary, so illuminating, and so volcanic for me, for my, my mind became completely inundated, and so I didn't think of the Swami. In fact, at the time, he was in San Francisco. He had gone there shortly before I joined. In fact, that same person, Bob Lefkowitz, Rabindranath Swarup, I met him the night he was getting ready to drive to San Francisco to be with the Swami. And I met him in a restaurant on 6th Street. I can't remember. It was like a macrobiotic restaurant. And he asked me to lend him some money or give him some money. I said, "What for?" He said, "I'm going to San Francisco and somebody stole one of our tires. Yeah, and so I need some money." I said, "Well, I don't really have any money, but I know how you can get some money." And by this time we were out on the street walking at night. He said, "How?" I said, "You could sell some pot." He said, "Oh no, we can't do that. That's against our principles." But he was smoking a cigarette. I said, "But you're smoking a cigarette." He said, "Oh," he threw it down, "You're my guru, you saved me," and he stamped it out. Anyway, and I also had a feeling at that point already that I wanted to just walk away from everything and have a new life, right? And so I said, "Pop, why don't you take me with you?" He thought about it, and he said, "No, I can't do that." I said, my heart sank to my stomach. He said, "The guy I'm going with, he wouldn't like it." That turned out to be Ray Rama. Anyway, that was one encounter that I had before I actually, had this complete epiphany or awakening, whatever you want to call it. So, what was the other question? Oh, how did we get out on the street? Oh, yes, when I saw that Bhardraj was really a capable artist, I engaged him to make the cover for a reprint. It was actually done on stencil. What do we call it? Stencils. Mimeograph. Stencil work. I was so. One of the things that, I mean, was really keeping me fixed. I was so impressed, so transformed by reading this little book. I thought everybody should have, we have to somehow find a way that everyone should read this book. I was so naive at the time. I thought, I actually believed that within 1 month, everybody in New York City is going to become Krishna-Conscious, because this is so absolutely revolutionary. And I thought maybe it would take a year for the rest of the world, but I really believed this. And so there was a point when I wanted to have more copies, but I didn't know how to get. I didn't know. I had no, because I was so adverse to books and schools, and I couldn't even really read and write properly. So the thing hit me that, oh, we could mimeograph it, and we need a cover. So Bardroj made the cover, and I bought a stencil mimeograph machine, paper, and I can't remember how much I spent, but we printed, I think, 5,000 copies, and I sold half those copies to Rupanuga, and got all my money back. And then we go out on the street and sell them. I thought, wow, this is like a perpetual gold mine. This is like, you take the book, you print it, costs next to nothing, you distribute it, and people read it, and they become devotees. Then they distribute it, and you get money, and you get more books. So it was a real 100%, how do you say, conviction that this is the thing to do. And it had nothing to do with being a book distributor or anything like that. It just seemed like, hey, this is a perpetual, right, format for attracting new people and distributing to, and you get money. It's just unbelievable. So so that's kind of how that happened, and that stayed with me ever since.
And when was this?
It was in Montreal.
1967?
I came in '67, yeah.
Okay.
So exact date when we really, Prabhupada came back, he left in June, I think. Or, yeah, he left about June. Went to India to recuperate, or, well, we thought he was never going to come back. But he did, and Kirtananda went with him. And at Chutananda, he also went to India, or he was already there at that time when Prabhupada went. So Prabhupada visited Montreal sometime in '68 and stayed on Henry Street. By that time, that building where...
Was it Henry Street or Prince Arthur?
See, now I don't know.
Because Henry Street is in New York.
Okay, then Prince Arthur. I'm
Okay,
sorry,
okay,
yeah, getting mixed up. Then one thing that happened when Prabhupada came the first time, I decided to line the stairway and the whole temple with little birthday candles. And the way so I had, each devotee had so many candles to do, and a certain space between each candle to make it look really nice. And I thought that this was a nice thing to do, and so I tried to coordinate it so that as soon as I saw that Prabhupada was coming, everyone would light a certain number of candles, and they'd all be lit by the time we got there. But Prabhupada wasn't showing up. I said, gee, that's what to do. So I thought maybe I should go to Prince Arthur. So I go to Prince Arthur Street, and Prabhupada's not there either. So then I run back, and by this time, Prabhupada, I don't know how he did that, he had come, and he's sitting on the Vyasasan, and I come in the door. You know, that was a big place, that bowling alley. And he says, who has done this? And I thought, oh man, I did the wrong thing. So I, said, well, somebody said, HANSADUTTA has done it. And he said, very nice, he said. Something like, very nice. Krishna has given you intelligence. I thought, oh, okay. So that was a very nice thing. One day, Prabhupada tried to teach me to sing the prayers of Queen Kunti in his room on Prince Arthur Street. But, I was adult, so I couldn't. But Janardhan, he was quite, capable as a student. He very quickly, could learn everything. Krishna. During that time, I think there was a John Mastami, maybe, but some high Vaishnav holiday. And Prabhupada, in those first years, he liked to cook in the kitchen, make some special preparation for that particular event. So I remember being in the same kitchen with Prabhupada, little kitchen, and I realized that Prabhupada was actually very small. I mean, short. Like my father was very short. And I couldn't help but ask him, and I saw him how adept he was at doing everything and graceful. So I couldn't resist but ask. I said, Prabhupada, how do you know all how to do all these things, the cooking and things? He said, yes, you see, I was a very inquisitive child. So my auntie and my mother, they would cook, and I would say, what is this and what is that, like this. Anyway, on this event, so the format was when everything was open, the plate would be put to Prabhupada as a Vyasasan, right? And when he was finished, he would get off the Vyasasan, and I would walk him across that long bowling alley space to the door. And so about halfway from the between the Vyasasan and the door, Prabhupada stops and turns to me. He said, "Your sweet balls are very good." And then I got a little, heady. He said, "But mine were better." So all these very sweet things take place. Another incident after a lecture, and a question and answer period came. One man raised his hand. He said, "Swamiji, would you sign my book? Because those Bhagavatams from India." Oh yes, So a man comes up to sign the book. Then another person raised their, "Would you sign my book too?" Yes, sign the book. Then a third person. So when the fourth person, right, I said, "Oh, now I will have to charge." So.
How is it to be with Prabhupada at that time? The devotees, they knew that Prabhupada is from the spiritual world, or how?
No, we didn't know anything. We just loved Prabhupada. He just was irresistible.
Okay.
I mean, of course, there was some philosophy, but Prabhupada was so accessible and so practical in his response on every level that the kind of of course that also exists, like when some great person is there, the people they have some awe and reverence, and that was also there for Prabhupada, but Prabhupada was always in a working mood. At least I remember at some point, when after Prabhupada came back from India, I kept thinking, do I really understand what this Krishna consciousness is? It seems so simple that maybe I don't get it right. And I had this prayer that I wished that I could spend a week with Prabhupada in immediate proximity, just to make sure I got it right. I mean, it may sound silly, but that's really, I was like, it seemed just so simple. That how could it be so simple? And yet it was a wonderful thing. Anyway, and then there was no reason why Prabhupada would come, or should come to Montreal, because he was busy in New York or San Francisco. But then one day it was announced that the Swami is coming, because he had some official business with the embassy, visas and things like that. And of course I got to stay with Prabhupada in this small room that they got him, which was basically just a bed and a couch, and there was a little alcove where there was a stove and a sink. And I was so nervous. The first night I was so nervous. I slept under that sink.
Was this the first time you saw Prabhupada?
No, I had seen it.
Because you said you first time saw him in Montreal.
No, I saw him when he got ready to leave New York for India.
Mm-hmm.
I saw him at that time. That's a story by itself. And I saw him when he came back, because we all came to receive him.
In New York?
But there was no, in
Okay.
New York. But
Okay.
there was no exchange or anything. It was just that I was part of that crowd of devotees, which was very ecstatic, and that's also a story. But anyway, so when he came to Montreal, that may be the first time that the first time is when we picked him up at the airport in Janardan's car, which was kind of a jalopy. So I'm in the back seat and I'm thinking, oh, I'm going to hear the Swami say something very profound and spiritual. So Prabhupada said, what kind of car is this? He asked him, and I can't remember the reply, and I don't even know what kind of car it was. So Prabhupada starts to tell this story about the man who could recognize any car just by hearing the sound. He'd say, oh, that's a Ford, or that's a Buick, that's a... And so his friend said, well, we want to test you to see if you really can. So they blindfolded him. And I'm listening to this story, and wondering, how is this spiritual? What is this spiritual talking about? So they blindfold the man, and okay, one car after another they pass by, and he says, oh, that's a Buick, and so forth and so on. Then finally they decide to tie all his tin cans to the donkey's tail and whip him and have him pass by, as if it were a car. So the man says, oh, that's a Ford. And Prabhupada just begins to belly laugh. And of course, because I was expecting something else, I didn't see how that was funny, or why Prabhupada is telling this story. So that's my point, is that Prabhupada was not stereotyped. He didn't feel obliged that he had to say something profound and mysterious, or particularly stereotypically spiritual. Anyway, that was my first real close encounter. So anyway, I'm sleeping under the sink and this little stove, but I'm so nervous I can't sleep. And at some point, maybe 1 in the morning or 2 in the morning, I hear some sound, and Prabhupada starts chanting, but he doesn't turn on the light. So I'm wondering, what should I do? So I thought, well, I should just, make like I'm sleeping. I don't say anything, don't make a sound. Next day, the same thing happens. I can't sleep. I'm nervous. so this time when Prabhupada in the early morning, 2 in the morning, whatever it was, starts to chant, I think I better make some sound, or that I'm awake. So when I do, then the light goes on, and Prabhupada says, "Oh, you're awake." And by this time, Prabhupada's sitting on a couch like this. By this time, I'm sitting right, looking up, and I say, "Oh, Swamiji, I'm so nervous. I just couldn't. I didn't sleep last night. I couldn't sleep tonight." Then Prabhupada leans down and he said, "Good." He said, "Actually, I don't like to sleep. I think sleeping is a waste of time. And I don't like my disciples to sleep." Then he says, "Actually, our aim is to make sleeping nil, eating nil, defending nil." He says, "We don't say that, but that is our aim." So that's my first, exchange.
When you say you were nervous, why were you nervous?
Why was I nervous? Because I had no immediate service to Prabhupada, in the sense that he'd tell me, "Look, I want you to do this or do that." Maybe that's why. But I found very quickly, like when Kirtananda was still there, he would do something, or something would happen, he would write a letter to the Swami, and the Swami would write back. And because I felt like, hey, we should go out, Kirtananda, come on, we should go out on the street. Why are we going to work? This is not good. So I felt like, in the military, you always know who's the ultimate end-all and be-all. And oftentimes you find yourself caught with someone who, like, you'd rather not have him tell you what to do, because he doesn't seem to really know what to do, or he has it in for you, or whatever. So I thought immediately, I have to do something. This was after Kirtananda left, and while he was still there, I have to do something so I can write a letter to the Swami. And then he'll write back, and then I'll do something else, and then I can write again. So that's kind of, what was it that I did? I think it was, we collected a certain amount of money or something. It was something to write about.
Yes.
And so from that point on, I was always directly, if not physically, by letter, connected with the Swami, Prabhupada. I don't know when we started calling, or the devotees started calling the Swami Prabhupada, but my wife Himavati at the time, she didn't like that word, and she just thought, I'm not just going to call him the Swami like I always have. But because everyone was getting on her case, she then said, "Swamiji, everyone says I have to call you Prabhupada, but I want to call you Swamiji, is that okay?" He said, "Yeah." He laughed, he said, "Okay." So that's how she was. She was very casual in her relation. I was a lot more, like a soldier and a superior, yes sir, no sir, whatever you say, sir. Even if Prabhupada asked me something, I always would first, before answering, I would say, "Prabhupada, do you really want me to tell you what I think?" He said, "Yes," and then I felt free. But I was not in the habit of just bantering back and forth with Prabhupada. Tamal was, some devotees were. Himavati was so,
Spontaneous?
Spontaneous and not artificial. It was just spontaneous. Maybe it's because she was a posthumous child, and so Prabhupada was sort of like her father. I remember when Prabhupada left Montreal, the Himavati just followed him right behind. Wherever the other devotees, at some point they stopped. They knew that, oh, this is immigration, you can't go past this point. She just kept going. So then Prabhupada realized that she was right behind him. He turned around and, patted her and stroked her on the head. And that, it was just... One time in London, I came in to Prabhupada's room. He had a big room. I don't know if you've ever been to London. Huge room, beautiful cut glass, leaded glass windows behind him that looked out to the lawn. He had a table there and a futon. So I come, for some reason I had to come see Prabhupada. I come and it's a big room. It's almost as big as that bowling alley, maybe not quite, but big. And then covered with white sheets and bolsters all red. I come in and Himavati's sitting behind the table with Prabhupada on that futon. And she has his hand in her hand. And she's reading his poem. And Prabhupada said, what about this line? What is this? Oh, Prabhupada, your headline, it's so long, you're very intelligent. So that was how, you know. And when he came somewhere where we were, she would cook. So this, at one instance, Shruti Kirti was the servant. So he says to him, he said, don't, cook very much, because Prabhupada hasn't been eating. He's not well. So, but Himavati, she just cooks the whole thing. And she was a very good cook. She was better than me. She comes in and she puts everything on Prabhupada's desk and goes. And after a certain time she comes back. And Prabhupada has eaten just about everything. And she says, but Prabhupada, everybody said that you were sick and you were not eating and I shouldn't cook. He says, no, they just don't know how to cook. So that was, and she was engaged in making clothing for Prabhupada's little deities that he carried wherever he went. He, when he came to Montreal, Himavati, I made some Jagannath deities, about this large, maybe this high, and she made clothes, little turbans and everything. So, and they set these deities next to where Prabhupada was sitting at the time, And so at some point Prabhupada looks over and he picks up one of the deities and he starts to examine the stitching. Really like looking at it, like, wow. And he said, who has done this? And someone says, well, Himavati. He said, oh, you can become self-realized just by sewing. Then she says, but Swamiji, I need a new sewing machine, but HANSADUTTA won't buy me one. Oh, Prabhupada says, oh, how is that? She says, well, he says it's too expensive because I want the best sewing machine. I want, in those days, Pfaff, at least by her, was considered to be the best, and it probably was. She said, I want that machine. I don't want another machine. I want the best. Prabhupada said, yes, you should have the best because the stitching is first class. So he turns to me, he said, you buy her a sewing machine. So I had to spend $300 for a new sewing machine. So that's, Prabhupada. And another point, it was in New York. We had come to New York from Montreal. She made Prabhupada a Western cut cowboy shirt, and with snaps. This one only has one snap, but they had 3 snaps, and snaps like this, out of silk, and saffron, of course. So we had come to Prabhupada's little room upstairs in the apartment, and she said, Swamiji, I made you this shirt. This is a cowboy shirt. He said, oh. He immediately took off his
kurta?
His kurta, yeah, his shirt, and put it on, and he was fascinated with the snaps. Like a little boy, he was snapping and admiring. So Himavati was looking at him, and she says, oh, Swamiji, you look like a cowboy, thinking an American cowboy with a cowboy shirt. Oh, Swamiji, you look like a cowboy. And he says, but I am a cowboy. I don't know what that means. I'm not inferring that, I have some special insight. But Prabhupada reciprocated, right? And as I said, with Himavati, it was just as flowing and natural and during that time, we had come to New York so Himavati could give birth to her baby. And it turned out to be stillborn. So the next day, when she came out of the hospital, Prabhupada announced that he's going to install the Jagannath deities in the New York temple. They were big, they were like this tall maybe. And he turned to Himavati and he said, "Can you make clothes for this installation?" And she said, "But Swamiji, I just came out of the hospital. I just had a stillborn birth." He said, "Oh, is it very difficult?" I said, "No, it's okay. I'll do it." And I don't know about other devotees, but in those days, Jagannath was just there were no clothes, nothing, just standing on the altar. And the routine was, you cook the prasadam, bring out the pots, bow down, and say Namo Vishnu Padaya 3 times, like that, and Namaste Saraswati Devi and Sri Chaitanya. Then you dish out and eat. That was it. It was very simple.
You would wait until Jagannath eats?
No.
Okay.
Really. And then, so we had an apartment on 6th Street, which was a few blocks from 2nd Street and 1 avenue over. So those deities were brought to our apartment on the 4th or 5th floor. And in the evening I went to sleep, she stayed up all night. When I got up the next morning, they had the turbans, they had the whole thing. I was like, how did she know? Because Prabhupada didn't tell, how to do it. How did she know? Anyway, there it was. So they were installed there. What was the other thing? Oh, yeah. And I went on to make little deities about this big. And some that were this big. And the devotees would wear them around the neck. You might have seen a picture here. Yeah. And I made a set for Prabhupada of the 3 deities, Subhadra, Balaram, and he was wearing them. And I still have them. Oh. But at one point, when we began, Himavati said to Swamiji, "Is there some special prayer for Lord Jagannath?" And he said, "Yes, Jagannath Swami Nayana Patagami Bhavatami." She said, "Oh, could you write it in Sanskrit and in English so I can inscribe it on the back of these deities?" So that's how that came out.
What was your interaction with Himavati? Because you said in the beginning that in New York they didn't like the householders because it was brahmachari oriented, and then you went to Montreal. How was the situation?
How did we do that? At first we lived in the temple and we just had some curtains partitioning that, so that Jadharani and female devotees. But at some point we got we got that room because of Ishan, and we also had another place. Maybe it was just before that, which was one room, and it had a big glass picture window, but it was on the 2nd floor. So she made curtains. And I had a very unusual dream there. Himavati made like a double sleeping bag, so we could, she was a very, very good seamstress. So one night I have this dream that Prabhupada knocks on the door, and okay, come in. He says, "I'm very tired. I want to take rest." Oh, okay. So we, Himavati gets up. He said, no, you sleep there, and HANSADUTTA sleep there. I sleep in the middle. Oh, no, we can't do that. This is a dream, of course. He said, no, you lie down, and I will sleep in the middle. So we do this. And in the dream, we have like a nap. Then Prabhupada wakes up, and he said, "I'd like to go for a ride." I still had that car. I think, okay. So, in the dream, we get in the car, and I'm driving along. I think I have to be careful to drive not so fast. Prabhupada said, drive a little faster. Okay, I drive a little faster. He keeps saying, "Oh, faster, still faster, more faster." And at some point, we're really like racing down the road, and Prabhupada is laughing. So that was a dream, what can I say? What was that other thing?
Maybe you can say a little bit about Himavati. How did you meet Himavati
Oh,
in the beginning?
well, I met her before I became a devotee.
Yeah.
And I was living in Hoboken alone. And I never wanted to get married. In fact, my mother used to ask me, "Why don't you want to get married? Have a nice..." I said, "No, I don't want to." Anyway, I wound up in Hoboken as going through the artist thing in this building. In fact, it was right across the street where they made a famous movie on the waterfront with Marlon Brando. And there was a scene there, a chicken coop scene, that was still there. You could see it just maybe 20 feet away. Anyway, a friend of mine, Paul Rizzuto, he was Italian, a very good painter, actually very good. Painted like a Rembrandt style painting. He invited me for lunch at his apartment in New York on the Lower East Side, and he was married. His wife's name was Susan. So when I was there, I was seeing how she was doing everything clean, kept everything orderly. I thought, that's pretty good. Maybe I should have a wife. So I got it in my head that, yeah, it's a good thing. I'm all alone. When I have to eat something, it's kind of. I thought, yeah, I'm going to get a wife. So I didn't know anyone. But one friend, we had, artists always go to parties in carouse in New York. So I had spent a couple hours talking to this girl, and that was Himavati. So I asked my friend, "Do you remember I was talking to that girl? And do you have a phone number for her? Do you know her, where she is?" He said, "Yeah, here's a number." So I called her up. I said, "Remember?" Yes, I remember. "Well, why don't we meet at the Metropolitan Museum of Art?" So, okay. So we meet, and then we, do what artists do, look at paintings, and then I take her to Hoboken, which is across the river, and we go to a restaurant to eat, some Italian restaurant. And I'm sitting across from her, and I said, "Me and you, we're going to get married." She said, What are you, crazy? You don't know me." I said, "No, I know that we're going to be married. There's no doubt about it." And then I took her home. And it wasn't long thereafter that we married. She lived in the Bronx, and so it was a great ordeal to take her home. You're supposed to take her home. So I kept telling her, "Why don't we just get married? This is very troublesome." She said she was a scholarship student, art student at Pratt University. She said, "Oh no, I can't do that. My mother would." Her mother hardly spoke English. She is, they escaped from the Ukraine. And she had a sister, Stephanie. Anyway, they didn't like me at all. And I never actually, I only met them once or twice. I made a point of avoiding. So at one point, I told her, I said, "Look, this is really too much to do, to go up to the Bronx and come back." I said, "If you don't marry me, I will just never see you again, that's all." So we got married. And then it didn't take long before we joined Prabhupada. I can't remember the dates right now, but it didn't take long. And anyway, that's how I came.
How was the householder situation as opposed to the brahmacharis at that time?
I understood right away that, although I was married, right, that our business is to serve Prabhupada, to work for Prabhupada, to do what had to be done for Prabhupada. And there should be, because in those days, only householders who had some capacity to manage and control their situation could live in the temple. So almost never lived together in the same room with Himavati. She always had a place, a room. I had a place. And our marriage was, Prabhupada was in the middle. Maybe that's the meaning of that dream. I never thought of that. Yeah, our engagement was, or our relationship was Prabhupada centered. It was just, we were Prabhupada. I asked her years later, a few years ago, she called me up after I hadn't heard from her 20 years. She called me up and she had a car, she needed money. And I thought, well, I owe her that much, okay. So I went to LA to pick up this car. And I asked her, why did you, you know, why did you marry me and go with the whole Krishna thing? She said, well, it was so exciting and it was such a great adventure and you were so confident that I just couldn't resist. So it was like that. It was, you know, but she's a Krishna Prabhupada devotee, you know. She doesn't go to the temple, she doesn't want to be bothered with all that stuff. And she could speak in public. When we first went to India, I remember one function in Calcutta. It was huge. 20,000, 30,000 people in the It was huge. So we were there, and all the sannyasis were sitting, you know, with their dandas, and when it came time to speak, that Prabhupada had her, you know, she was the main speaker, and all the sannyasis said, like, what's going on? So she could articulate. She was not a singer. Sort of, I think Jamuna and her were like the first ladies of ISKCON. And you had people like Malati, Kasalya. They were also, but I think Jamuna and Himavati were the leading ladies, so to speak. Yeah. Jamuna was that she could sing very well. Beautiful singer. Himavati didn't sing. I mean, she, you know, sang along, but she never tried to take a leading singing.
From the letters, Prabhupada very much praises Himavati's deity worship.
Yeah, she was adept, as I said, at sewing, and she took care for the deities. I can't say that I was much of a deity worshiper or even a temple. You know, if I could get a dozen guys, round up a dozen